This is the history that you will not find in both the history books of Namibia, the history books of Germany, or anywhere in the world. So it's quite important for us that we change the narrative.
So why are we here today to talk about reparation for the Nama and Ovaherero? And it's because it also fits to the discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals, namely the Sustainable Development Goal 16, which talks about peace, justice, and strong institutions. The reason also why we are discussing this is that, as many of you have known, or maybe have not known, there have been long discussions since 1989, many claims and trials that made by the Namas and the committee of the Nama and Ovaherero to seek to gain justice for the genocide that has been committed by Germany during the colonial time. And so far, nothing has been done. I'm talking about the Nama and Ovaherero today, but we all know that it's also something that we can extend to the whole African community. And of course, Germany has recently made a moral recognition of his acknowledgement of his participation in this genocide, but that does not mean that Germany has completely taken full ownership for this action. That's why we're talking. That's what we want to talk today, because when we look the joint declaration that Germany has made with the committee, with the Namibian government, because that's one point. Germany had made a joint declaration with the Namibian government that is excluding, or where the representatives of the community themselves were not there. And when you look at the document as well, we can note a lot of patriarchal ways of talking, euphemism, and a lot of things that rather point toward a refusal of taking full ownership. And as you all know, the SDG is talking about responsible communities, so that would be against it. So today we're there to talk about this and see and try to bring the relationship between both. So that's what I hope you could get an overview, and that help you to be set into this discussion of today.
So let's start, because I'm sure that we all want to know the perspective. So I will give the first floor to Doris to present herself and then to start with the input. So let's start.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Doris Roos, and I'm from the Nama Traditional Authorities Technical Committee. I will be sharing with you the historical context that led up to the genocide of 1904 and up to 1908. For us, it's important that we change the narrative of what has been told. You know, this is the history that you will not find in both the history books of Namibia, the history books of Germany, or anywhere in the world. So it's quite important for us that we change the narrative and we give the truth, share the truth, and educate as many people as possible so that people will know what actually happened. A lot of people didn't know about the existence of this genocide and that it even took place. So it's important for us that we share what we know so that so that the world can get the facts from those of us whose ancestors were directly affected by the genocide. I will start by giving you the pre-genocide period for the Ovaherero and the Nama in Namibia. Prior to the genocide, the Ovaherero sovereign polities of Herero land comprised of a federation of several Herero-speaking Bantu people, whose ancestral land covered the central highlands of modern-day Namibia. They were governed by chiefs and at times a paramount chief and they were subject to a customary Ovaherero law. So there were systems in place. It's not as if there were no systems in place. There were systems in place. For the Nama sovereign polities of Great Namaqualand included several Nama tribes, and I'm not going to mention the different tribes. Of Khoi people, the Nama, whose ancestral lands cover much of the southern and some of the northern Namibia, who were governed by chiefs, by gaubs, kings and captains, and subject to the supremacy of customary Namaqualand land. Again, just like for the Hereros, there were systems in place, traditional systems of keeping traditional laws in place. So there were some rules and regulations that were in place. The Nama polities belong to a confederation established under the Treaty of Wagenas of 1858, which guaranteed the unity and equality of the Nama clans and people, who numbered over, at that time, by the late 19th century, over 20,000 people. The Ovaherero and Nama traditional authorities today are corporate successors to the tribal authorities. So Namibia, by the 1870s, most of the Herero and Nama polities and chiefs had established friendly diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom through English commissioner, the Palgrave. They promised Queen Victoria that they would protect the dozens of English traders living and traveling in Heroland and in Great Namaqualand. The English traders included those living since the 1850s at the British exclave of Walvis Bay, who were harvesting guano and on the island of that is known as Namingwis, that's our local clique. And also a few dozen Methodist and English preachers of the London and Wesleyan missionary societies who had begun spreading the word of Christ in Heroland and in Great Namaqualand in the 1820s. Next slide. Yeah, the German, no, back to the next one, the previous one. The German Rhenish missionaries began living and preaching in Heroland in Great Namaqualand in the 1830s. Upon the birth of the German Empire in 1871, a pro-colonial movement sparked in the German industrial, academic, and political classes. Germany sponsored 5 investigative trips to Africa in the 1870s to seek opportunities for commercial exploitation and find. In the words of Chancellor Bülow at that time, its place in the sun, which was Namibia. On May 1st, 1883, through the influence of the Rhenish missionary at Batanium, Chief Joseph Friedrichs of the Batanian Nama, sold to German trader Adolf Lutheritz the coastal rights from the Orange River to Namingwis, which is today's Lutheritz, later renamed as Lutheritz Bay. The sale of Lutheritz was heavily protested through Commissioner Palgrave by Paramount Chief Gamaherero, who petitioned the English government to intercede and prevent Germany's unilateral and unrequested protection that they were now claiming over the local people. The British declined and accepted Germany's claim over Lutheritz. They later declared they would protect all territory from the Orange River in the south to the Kunene River in the north. Those are today the southern and northern borders of today's Namibia. Paramount Chief Gamaherero refused to accept this and immediately petitioned for relief from the Aborigines Protection Society, which was an international NGO based in London that advocated for the rights of indigenous people. Next slide. From November 15, 1884 to February 26, 1885, Germany, that request was did not work out in any case. So from 1884, from November to February, Germany hosted the Berlin West Africa Conference, the famous Berlin Conference where Africa was sliced up like a piece of cake. Following the conference, Germany dispatched Imperial Commissioner Dr. Heinrich Ernst Göring to negotiate and conclude protection treaties in Namibia. As a result, the German government signed 14 treaties with the Ovaherero and Nama polities. These treaties, often referred to as the protection treaties, invoking the international law construct of protectorate, contained promises that were broken and stood for principles that were long forgotten, ignored, and discarded by the German government by the late 1890s. While those treaties were in place, there were major acts of major violence and atrocities that were taking place in today's Namibia. For example, in 1889, there was the Captain Kurt von Francois, a German lieutenant who arrived, a captain who arrived in Namibia. For example, said, "Today we burned Wurrenkrans to the ground." And the reason for that was Chief Hendrik Witbooi of the Witbooi Nama, captain of the Great Namakwaland, a national hero of Namibia, whose land ranged from Wurrenkrans and the Gamsberg in the 1890s, refused to sign a treaty with Germany. And when he refused to sign the treaty with Germany, Kurt von Francois decided they're going to burn down Wurrenkrans. That was the start of major atrocities that took place across Namibia against the Hereros and the Namas. That was in 1889 already. So when he refused to sign in 1890, they were attacked. That involved the killing of sleeping Namas, included women and children. And they were claiming that it was too dark to see who was a man and who was a woman or who was a child, to the extent that the chief's son was killed while he was crawling. He was paralyzed. He was paralyzed and he could not walk. And while he was crawling, they found him in a river. And it is recorded, it was something to boast about, how they killed the chief's son. Secondly, the Ludwig system, there was a system of submit or die. Germany replaced Francois, the Kurt von Francois, with Governor Tutor Ludwig in the late 1893. In part due to von Francois' failure to defeat Chief Witbooi, who retreated to a defense in the No-Kloof Mountains after Francois raised Wurrenkrans. So Ludwig's policies were more policies of divide and conquer. Germany expanded its influence by seizing land of uncooperative tribes and clans, enslaving tribe members, including women and children as forced laborers, taking the land and forcing them to work on the land that they previously owned, and introducing a system of privatized violence in the form of flocking as a form of punishment. Far beyond divide and conquer, Ludwig's system is better described as a policy of submit or die. He arrived in Namibia in January 1894 with 250 Schutztruppe reinforcements, and it was a matter for the local people: you either submit or you die. Then there was the whole issue of fraudulent lending and eviction at gunpoint. This is all leading up to the actual genocide, apart from the genocide that started when they declared at Wurrenkrans that they're going to burn down, and they started to kill people left and right at Doornkrans. So fraudulent lending and eviction at gunpoint. The German government erected and supported a system of fraudulent lending practices by German colonial companies, banks, and land speculators, as well as the German colonial authorities that supported the action and evicted Ovaherero and Nama families from their lands at gunpoint. They had to pay, when there was a major plague that break out and they lost their animals, they were given loans, but they had to pay for these loans in heavy terms, and their land was taken at gunpoint. Then there was the whole issue of privatized violence. For over a decade, flocking was unregulated and treated as an absolute right of a white employer vis-a-vis African employees under the substantive theory of breach of contract and the procedural remedial theory of the fatherly right of punishment. It was the right to flock the natives. Under German colonial law as implemented and practiced, breach of contract was punishable by flocking, and even minor offenses were reported and punished. So some of these offenses were even recorded with the names, the dates of people for walking in a garden, for trespassing, for stealing, for something to eat. They were flogged, and it was never less than 25 lashes that they had to get. It was the right of the white supremacists to beat the locals and to flog the locals. Then we have Okahandja, December 1903. In December 1903, Lieutenant Zoon, another German lieutenant, summoned Ovaherero leaders and demanded that they sign a contract handing over numerous tracts of ancestral land. Upon their refusal, Zoon subsequently forged the signatures, announced these new borders on December 8. These borders for Herero reservations was an ultra-vires and illegal act and purported to diminish Herero sovereignty to the areas immediately surrounding the towns of Okahandja, Otimbingwe, Omburo, and Oshinene. This was a clear violation of Article 1 of the German government's Treaty of December 6, 1894 with Herero land, signed by Samuel Maherero and ratified by his councilmen, setting the southern border of the nation and the violation of the border protocol of January 15, 1895. It was a matter of we are in charge, we do as we please. So nothing, even their own policies and their own laws that they put down, they were not respecting and they were not keeping it. Zoon's disrespect and violations rose to levels of sacrilege. He exhumed the holy graveyards of the royal Maherero dynasty and defiled corpses, despite knowing that the Ovaherero worshipped their ancestors in order to sell them for healthy profits to the German state-funded and state-operated human remains enterprise. So this was total disrespect for what was the culture, in the disrespect for the cultures, local cultures, and the systems that they have put in place. They had such little respect for their own policies and own agreements that they enforce on the locals. So all this was systematically being enforced prior to the actual genocide that took place. So this is just to give you a little bit of background. It was a process that started way back in when they were trying to find the spot in the sun. They found the spot in the sun, and they started the abuse and the control, divide and rule, and heavy-handed oppression started already at that time, taking the land, taking the animals, killing men, women, and children already before they have even actually started with the extermination order. So this is just pre-genocide little bit of history that I'm giving you, and then we will discuss it further. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doris, for this overview.